Hi, welcome to the IHC Craft Room. I'm Mary. In today's video, I'm excited to show you how I dot painted these two heart-shaped magnets for Valentine's Day. I picked up all the materials that I needed at my local dollar store, and I'll show you how to make these step by step. Grab all your stuff, and let's get crafty. This is Mary. Welcome to the IHC Craft Room. For materials, we'll begin with some wood shapes. We're going to be using hearts for this project, and I picked these up from the dollar store. Some chalk paint in black and white, Liquitex matte varnish, acrylic paint in Christmas red, white, silver morning, peacock blue, and tropical blue, and some magnets. For tools, we have parchment paper, my dotting tools, of course, some paint brushes, a paint palette, a cup of water, a wet rag, Q-tips, toothpicks, and some Gorilla Glue. Let's start by preparing our wood shapes. Whenever possible, I like to use chalk paint on wood so that it creates a level surface to work on, and this project is no exception. You can totally get away with one coat of chalk paint, but that's not how I roll, so I did 2 thin coats of black chalk paint. And for the other heart, I only did 1 thin coat of white because I want this magnet to be a bright and vibrant red. So I'll do another 2 thin coats of Christmas red paint on this heart. Once the base paint has dried really well, I'll go back with 2 thin coats of varnish to protect my base paint in the event that I make some mistakes, which I usually do. Bueno, we're ready to get started on our first magnet. For this magnet, I'm going for what I like to call the explosion of dots look. All we're going to do is cover this entire heart in peacock blue dots, tropical blue dots, and white dots. That's literally it. I'm starting with the largest dots first, so I'm using the 4.5 white rod, and you'll notice that I pop bubbles in my paint as I go. It's a good habit to get into, trust me. For this design, I don't want there to be a pattern. I just want dots scattered around the whole surface here and there. Since I want these dots to stay large, I'll make sure to add more paint to my dotting tool between each dot. This will keep the size of each dot fairly uniform. I'm going to rotate through each color, ending with white, before we move on to the next size dot. I'm going to switch to the 3mm green stylus, and we're going to do this all over again. Except for these dots, I won't reload the paint onto my stylus between each dot. I'm not worried about keeping them the same size. I'll do 2 dots before adding more paint. The key with this design is to take your time because it's very easy to accidentally dot over your dot. This video is obviously very sped up, so keep that in mind. I'm going much slower in real life. Awesome. Now let's shift down to an even smaller size stylus. We'll use the 1mm blue stylus to start getting even smaller dots. Again, I'm putting down at least 2 dots before adding more paint to my stylus. And since there are a lot less open spaces, I'm being even more careful where I place my dotting tool full of paint. You could totally stop here and have a beautiful magnet, but I'm going to add in some even tinier dots. I'm not quite sure why I didn't size down on my stylus to the yellow 0.8mm stylus, but if you've got one, feel free to go ahead and do that. The smaller the stylus, the easier it'll be to get these teeny tiny dots. Remember to take your time because this is the trickiest part of all. But before you know it, you'll be adding the final dots in, and then voila! Wow, isn't that lovely? An explosion of dots. I am so jazzed with how it turned out, and I bet my Valentine is gonna love it. For this design, I'm going to be using white paint, and I'll make 2 or 3 small mandalas. So let's start with the largest one. For the center dot, I'm using the 4.5 white rod. Now let's add a trim around that using the 1mm blue stylus. You'll notice I'm using a cross formation to lay down my dots. This will keep them somewhat evenly spaced. For the next row, I'll flip over the stylus to use the larger 1.25mm end, and then add some more dots, leaving a small gap in between each. In row 3, we'll size up our stylus to the pink 2mm and drop a dot in the gap left from row 2. Doesn't that look pretty? For row 4, let's size up our stylus again to the 3mm this time and add a dot in the gap from row 3. Using the 1mm blue stylus, let's add a small dot right on top of each dot from row 4, like a little hat. Now let's use our smallest stylus to walk the dots around the dots from row 4. The key to the walking the dots technique is not to add paint to your stylus between each dot. Let's slow this down a bit so you can see what I mean. I add paint to my stylus, and then without adding any more, I dot, dot, dot until I run out of paint, with each dot getting progressively smaller as the paint diminishes on my stylus. This gives you a gradual progression of smaller and smaller dots until the paint is gone. And that is walking the dots. Let's do that one more time. We'll add a slightly larger dot at the very top, and then we'll walk the dots down and around the ones we just completed. I love this look. It's giving petals, you know? Once that's done, let's go back to row 2 and we'll place 2 tiny dots in the gaps on that row, just beneath the dots from row 3. Remember to keep cleaning your stylus on the wet rag every few dots so that you don't get a pileup of paint on your stylus, because that'll result in larger dots than you're shooting for. And with that, this little mandala is complete. Let's move on to the next one. Using the 3mm green stylus, let's place our center dot. Now I'm going to flip over the stylus to use the smaller 1.25mm end, and I'll drop 4 dots in a cross formation in our first row. Let's size down to the 1mm stylus and add 2 small dots in between each of the larger dots to make a cute little pattern. Then we'll size up for the next row to the white 2.5mm stylus and use another cross formation to keep the dots spaced somewhat evenly. For the next row, we'll use the 2mm pink stylus to drop a dot and then drag it down in a swipe so that you get a tapered end. Full disclosure, for some reason, I really struggled with my swipes on this magnet, and consequently, the ends of my swipes were more voluptuous than I was shooting for. Oh well, no biggie. Once we have our swipes done, let's go ahead and walk the dots around them using the 0.8mm yellow stylus. Isn't that pretty? Okay, we'll come back for finishing touches a little later. Let's move on to the last and smallest mandala. I'm using the 6.5 white rod for the center dot. Then using the 0.8mm yellow stylus, let's go ahead with our trusty cross formation all the way around. And then I'll clean off my dotting tool and add just a bit of paint back to it before adding some tiny dots in the gaps in between. Now for row 2, let's add some more paint to the dotting tool, and we'll drop a dot right over the tiny dots in row 1, and then we'll pop 3 tiny dots in the space in between. Beautiful! Now all that's left is some finishing touches. On the medium-sized mandala, I'm going to use the 2mm pink stylus, and I'm going to pop a dot in between each swipe from row 3, just above the dot from row 2. Perfect! Now let's use the same stylus, and I'm going to pop a dot right in between each of our petals. There we go, that did it. This beauty is all done, and just look at her. Isn't she lovely? I originally intended to add some silver to this design, but no, this is exactly as it should be. Alrighty, after a couple of thin coats of varnish, it's time to get these cuties magnetized. Let's go. This is the easiest part of all. It's time to put the magnets on. I'm just going to place a small drop of Gorilla Super Glue down on the back of the magnets and then drop a magnet on top, making sure that it sticks down really well. That's it, and that's all. Super simple, and since these wood shapes are light, 3 magnets will be more than enough to keep them up on my refrigerator. Oh man, how cute do they look? I am in love. So what do you think? It came out really awesome, right? I'm super thrilled with the final results, and they were super, super simple to do. You can totally change the style up 100 different ways, change the colors, change the dotting pattern. I really enjoyed making these, and I love the way they look on my refrigerator. I can't wait to hear what you think about them in the comments below. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about dot painting, check out one of these videos. And don't forget to subscribe so that we can continue to get crafty together. Toodaloo!